The world as we knew it ceased to exist 5 years ago. Skyscrapers that once pierced the sky now stand as hollow shells, their windows shattered, their interiors haunted by memories of a bustling past. Streets once teeming with life lie silent, save for the whisper of wind carrying debris through abandoned intersections. This is the reality Maria and João face every day. In their mid-30s, they've become survivors in a world that's forgotten how to live. Their eyes, once bright with dreams of the future, now scan the horizon for threats and opportunities alike. Every step they take echoes through empty city canyons, a reminder of the billions lost to a pandemic that rewrote human history. But in this desolation, their intertwined hands tell a different story, one of resilience, of love that refuses to be extinguished even as the world burns around them. What drives them forward? Is it mere survival instinct, or something more profound? As they navigate through the ruins of civilization, Maria and João carry not just the weight of their backpacks, but the hope for a future they can barely imagine. The challenges they face are relentless, scavenging for food in picked-over supermarkets, purifying water from contaminated sources, and evading the desperate souls who've let go of their humanity in the face of apocalypse. Yet, amidst the decay, nature reclaims its domain. Vines crawl up the sides of abandoned buildings, and wildlife roams freely through once busy streets. It's a world reborn, indifferent to human suffering, offering both beauty and danger in equal measure. For Maria and João, each day is a testament to their will to live, to love, and to hope. But at what cost? How long can one hold on to their principles when every day is a fight for survival? As they move through this transformed landscape, the couple must confront not just external threats, but the changes within themselves. Are they still the people they were before the world ended, or has this new reality forged them into something else entirely? Their journey is more than a search for safety, it's a quest to rediscover what it means to be human in a world that's lost its humanity. As night falls and they seek shelter in the husk of what was once a family home, Maria and João huddle close, their whispered conversations a lifeline to sanity. They share memories of the world that was, dreams of what could be, and fears of what tomorrow might bring. In this intimate moment, surrounded by the remnants of a lost civilization, they are both fragile and indomitable. Their love story, unfolding against the backdrop of humanity's darkest hour, poses a question to all who hear it. In a world stripped bare, what remains at the core of human existence? As Maria and João face another uncertain dawn, their story challenges us to consider what we would cling to if everything else were taken away. Would we find the strength to keep moving forward? Would we, like them, discover that even in the ruins of the world, the human spirit can find reasons to endure, to hope, and to love? 5 years ago, the world changed forever. It began with whispers, then headlines, and finally, panic. A virus, unlike anything seen before, emerged from the shadows of an interconnected world. Its origin remains a subject of debate, but its impact was undeniable. Cities fell silent, one by one, as the pandemic swept across continents with ruthless efficiency. Governments scrambled to respond, but the virus was always one step ahead. Hospitals overflowed, economies crumbled, and society began to fray at the edges. Maria, then a nurse on the front lines, watched as her colleagues fell, one by one, to the very disease they fought to contain. The memory of those final days in the hospital haunts her still, the desperate faces, the sound of ventilators, the smell of disinfectant masking something far worse. João, an engineer working on critical infrastructure, witnessed the slow collapse of the systems that held modern civilization together. Power grids failed, water treatment plants went offline, and communication networks crackled into silence. The world they knew vanished in a matter of months. But how did humanity reach this point? Was it merely bad luck, or had we sown the seeds of our own destruction? The virus exposed the fragility of our global systems, the inadequacy of our preparedness, and the depth of our interdependence. As nations turned inward, closing borders and hoarding resources, the true cost of globalization became painfully clear. The pandemic didn't just take lives, it unraveled the very fabric of society. Law and order began to break down as fear took hold. Neighbors turned against neighbors, and communities fractured under the weight of suspicion and scarcity. In this chaos, Maria and Joao's paths crossed at a refugee camp on the outskirts of what was once a thriving metropolis. Amid the desperation and despair, they found in each other a reason to keep going. Their decision to leave the camp and strike out on their own was born of necessity and hope, a belief that somewhere, beyond the horizon, lay a chance for a new beginning. But what drives people to hold on to hope in the face of overwhelming odds? Is it a fundamental aspect of human nature, or a delusion that allows us to face the unthinkable? As Maria and Joao set out into the unknown, they carried with them not just the physical scars of survival, but the emotional weight of all they had witnessed and lost. The world they traversed was a testament to the scale of the catastrophe: abandoned vehicles clogging highways, forests reclaiming suburbs, and the eerie silence of a world without the constant hum of human activity. Yet, even in this desolation, life found a way to persist. Nature, unburdened by human interference, began to flourish in unexpected ways. Animals roamed freely through urban areas, and plants broke through concrete, painting a picture of a world both familiar and alien. This new reality forced Maria and Joao to confront fundamental questions about their place in the world, and the future of humanity itself. What does it mean to rebuild when the foundations of civilization have crumbled? Can society be reconstructed, or are we doomed to a future of isolated enclaves and constant struggle? As they journeyed, Maria and Joao encountered others who had survived the initial catastrophe, some clinging to the remnants of the old world, others embracing the harsh new reality. Each encounter challenged their perceptions and tested their resolve. They learned that survival wasn't just about finding food and shelter, it was about maintaining their humanity in a world that seemed intent on stripping it away. The origin of chaos had reshaped not just the physical landscape but the moral and ethical terrain as well. In this new world, where did one draw the line between right and wrong? How much of oneself must be sacrificed in the name of survival? These questions haunted Maria and Joao as they pushed forward, seeking not just a safe haven but a purpose in a world that had lost its way. Their journey was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, but also a stark reminder of how quickly the structures of civilization can crumble when faced with an existential threat. As they looked to the future, uncertain and fraught with danger, Maria and Joao clung to each other and to the hope that somewhere, amid the ruins of the old world, they could find the seeds of a new one. But at what cost would this new world be built, and would it be worth the price paid? Maria and Joao's footsteps echoed through the empty streets as they navigated the urban wasteland. Every corner turned, every building entered was a gamble. Would they find supplies or danger? The city, once a symbol of human achievement, now stood as a monument to our fragility. Shattered windows reflected the harsh sunlight, creating a kaleidoscope of broken dreams. The couple moved with practiced caution, their senses heightened by months of constant vigilance. A rustle in a nearby alley sent them ducking for cover, hearts pounding. Was it just the wind, or something more sinister? Survival in this new world demanded constant awareness, quick thinking, and sometimes, hard choices. As they approached a partially collapsed pharmacy, Maria's eyes lit up with professional interest. "We need to check it out," she whispered to Joao, her medical training kicking in. "There might be antibiotics, painkillers, things we can't afford to pass up." Joao nodded, understanding the risks and rewards. They had learned early on that knowledge was as valuable as any physical resource. Maria's medical expertise and Joao's engineering skills had saved their lives more than once. Entering the pharmacy, they moved silently, years of scavenging having taught them the art of stealth. The shelves were mostly bare, picked clean by earlier survivors or looters. But Maria's trained eye spotted potential where others might have seen only debris. She carefully collected expired medications, knowing that many retained some efficacy beyond their labeled date. Joao, meanwhile, gathered materials he could repurpose: plastic tubing, rubber stoppers, anything that might prove useful in their ongoing struggle to purify water and create makeshift tools. As they worked, a distant sound froze them in place: voices, approaching fast. The pharmacy's broken door offered little protection. Decision time: hide and hope the newcomers passed by, or make a run for it. In moments like these, instinct often trumped reason. They chose to flee, slipping out through a rear window just as the voices grew louder. Heart pounding, they sprinted through back alleys, the weight of their backpacks a constant reminder of the fine line between greed and necessity. How much was too much to carry? At what point did possessions become a liability rather than an asset? These questions plagued them with every step. As night fell, they sought shelter in an abandoned office building, barricading themselves in a corner office with a view of the street below. Joao worked on their water filtration system, a clever contraption of salvaged parts that turned murky liquid into something drinkable. Maria inventoried their new supplies, mind racing with potential uses for each item. In the quiet moments, they allowed themselves to remember the world before. The luxury of turning on a tap for clean water, of walking into a store fully stocked with food and medicine. How quickly it had all crumbled. Yet here they were, still fighting, still hoping. But for what? The question hung between them, unspoken but ever-present. Was mere survival enough, or were they clinging to the hope of something more? Days blended into weeks as they moved through the city, each discovery a small victory, each setback a lesson learned. They became experts in urban foraging, knowing which plants growing through the cracks in the sidewalk were edible, which buildings were likely to still hold useful supplies. But the city was not without its dangers. Other survivors, driven by desperation or darker motivations, posed a constant threat. Maria and Joao had learned to read the signs: fresh graffiti, recently moved debris, the faint smell of a campfire. They avoided other humans when possible, a sad necessity in a world where trust had become a luxury few could afford. One morning, they stumbled upon a group of raiders ransacking a nearby building. Hidden behind a rusted-out car, they watched in tense silence as the group argued over their finds. The scene was a stark reminder of how thin the veneer of civilization had become. Would they have become like that, without each other? The thought was chilling. As they continued their journey through the ruins, Maria and Joao faced not just physical challenges but philosophical ones as well. In a world stripped of societal norms, what defined right and wrong? How did one balance self-preservation with compassion? Each decision, each interaction, forced them to confront these questions anew. The ruins themselves seemed to mock their efforts, towering monuments to a civilization that had thought itself invincible. Yet amid the decay, life persisted. Plants reclaimed abandoned lots, birds nested in empty buildings, and even the air seemed cleaner, free from the pollution of industry. Nature's resilience offered a glimmer of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest times, renewal was possible. But at what cost had this new balance been achieved? And what role did humanity have in this changed world? As Maria and Joao pushed on, their bond grew stronger, tempered by shared hardships and small triumphs. They were more than survivors now, they were partners in the truest sense, each the other's reason to keep fighting, to keep hoping. But the question remained, in a world of ruins, what were they really surviving for? Was there truly a future to be built, or were they simply delaying the inevitable? The city's silent streets offered no answers, only more challenges to overcome, more ruins to navigate. Yet they pressed on, driven by a hope they couldn't fully articulate but refused to abandon. In the face of overwhelming odds, they chose to believe that their journey had purpose, that somewhere beyond the horizon lay not just safety, but the chance to rebuild, to redefine what it meant to be human in a world forever changed. The unforgiving winter wind howled through the skeletal remains of skyscrapers, carrying with it a bitter chill that seemed to penetrate to the very marrow of their bones. Maria and João huddled closer, their breaths forming small clouds in the frigid air. They had been pushing themselves hard, too hard perhaps, in their relentless search for a safe haven. Now, as they sought shelter in the husk of an old apartment building, the toll of their journey became painfully apparent. João's usually steady steps faltered, his face pale and drawn. "I'm fine," he insisted, but Maria's trained eye caught the slight tremor in his hands, the sheen of sweat on his brow despite the cold. She knew the signs all too well. João was sick, dangerously so. As night fell, João's condition deteriorated rapidly. Fever gripped him, his body alternating between violent shivers and burning heat. Maria's mind raced, her medical training kicking into high gear. What supplies did they have? What could she improvise? In the world before, she would have had a fully stocked hospital at her disposal. Now, she had to make do with what little they carried and what she could scavenge from their immediate surroundings. The irony wasn't lost on her, a trained nurse, now reduced to using primitive methods to save the life of the person who meant everything to her. As João's fever spiked, Maria faced a critical decision. Their meager supply of antibiotics might be the only thing standing between João and death, but using them now meant leaving themselves vulnerable in the future. In a world where every resource was precious, could she justify using so much for one person, even if that person was her partner, her lifeline in this desolate world? The ethical dilemmas of their new reality never ceased to challenge her. Hours blended into days as Maria fought tirelessly to bring João's fever down. She used every trick she knew: cool compresses, herbal teas brewed from plants she recognized growing through the cracks in the pavement, even resorting to the ancient practice of bloodletting with a sterilized knife when João's temperature refused to break. Through it all, she talked to him, her voice a lifeline pulling him back from the brink. She shared memories of their life before, plans for their future, anything to keep him tethered to this world. In João's fevered state, past and present blurred. He muttered about projects left unfinished, colleagues long since gone, and dreams that now seemed like cruel jokes. Maria listened, her heart breaking at the raw pain in his voice, the losses they had both endured laid bare in his delirium. It was a stark reminder of the psychological toll their new reality had taken, the grief and trauma they carried with them every day. As João fought for his life, Maria was forced to confront her deepest fears. What would she do if she lost him? In a world that had taken everything else, could she bear to lose the one person who gave her life meaning? The thought of continuing alone was almost unbearable, yet she knew she would have to find the strength if the worst happened. It was a brutal calculus, the need to plan for survival warring with the desperate hope that such plans wouldn't be necessary. On the third night, as a storm raged outside, João's fever finally broke. The moment his eyes cleared, focusing on Maria with recognition and love, was like the first ray of sunlight after an endless night. They clung to each other, tears mixing with sweat and grime, the relief almost palpable in the air around them. They had faced death and emerged stronger, their bond forged anew in the crucible of this trial. As João slowly regained his strength, they talked about what they had experienced. The vulnerability of those days had stripped away any remaining barriers between them. They shared their deepest fears, their moments of doubt, and the dreams that kept them going even in the darkest times. It was a new level of intimacy, born from the shared struggle for survival. This brush with death had changed them both. Maria found reserves of strength she never knew she possessed, a fierce determination that would serve them well in the challenges to come. João, humbled by his brush with mortality, gained a new appreciation for the fragility of life and the strength of their partnership. Together, they emerged from this trial not just as survivors, but as partners in the truest sense, each the other's reason for pushing forward, for believing in a future worth fighting for. As they prepared to leave their temporary shelter, they looked at each other with new eyes. The world outside was no less dangerous, no less uncertain, but they faced it with a renewed sense of purpose. Their love, tested by the harshest of circumstances, had not just endured but grown stronger. It was a beacon of hope in a world that often seemed devoid of it. Yet, as they stepped back into the ruined world, questions lingered. How many more trials could they endure? Was their strength a testament to the indomitable human spirit, or merely delaying the inevitable? And in a world that had lost so much, was their love enough to build a future on? These questions had no easy answers, but as Maria and João set out once more, hand in hand, they were determined to find out. Their journey was far from over, but they faced it together, stronger for having weathered this storm, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The sun had barely crested the horizon when Maria and João heard it, a child's cry, piercing through the eerie silence of the abandoned city. They froze, exchanging a look of disbelief and caution. Human encounters were rare and often dangerous. But a child? That changed everything. Moving silently, they traced the sound to its source, a dilapidated convenience store. There, huddled behind a toppled shelving unit, they found them, a man, gaunt and wild-eyed, clutching two small children. The oldest couldn't have been more than 6, the younger barely toddling. The man's eyes darted between Maria and João, a mixture of fear and desperate hope evident in his gaze. "Please," he croaked, his voice hoarse from disuse. "We haven't eaten in days." The children whimpered, their tiny frames a testament to prolonged hunger. Maria and João faced an immediate moral dilemma. Their own supplies were limited, carefully rationed to last until they could find more. Sharing meant potentially compromising their own survival. Yet, could they turn their backs on this family? The ethical complexities of their post-apocalyptic world crashed down upon them in this moment. João reached for their pack, but Maria caught his arm. "Wait," she whispered. "We need to think this through. It wasn't just about food. Helping this family could slow them down, make them more vulnerable. In a world where every decision could mean life or death, compassion was a luxury they might not be able to afford." But as they looked at the children's faces, hollow-cheeked and hopeful, they knew they couldn't walk away. "We'll share what we can," João said finally, his voice firm. Maria nodded, her medical training kicking in as she assessed the family's condition. As they divided their precious supplies, dried fruit, a few strips of jerky, and half of their remaining water, the man introduced himself as Carlos. His story tumbled out between bites. A former schoolteacher, he had been on a camping trip with his kids when the world fell apart. They'd been on the move ever since, each day a struggle to survive. Maria tended to the children, her heart aching at their malnourished state. She used some of their hard-won medical supplies to treat minor infections and wounds. João, meanwhile, worked with Carlos to secure the store against potential threats, sharing tips on scavenging and water purification. As night fell, They made the decision to camp together, safety in numbers outweighing the risk of staying in one place. Around a small, carefully concealed fire, they shared stories of the world before. Carlos spoke of his wife, lost in the early days of the pandemic. The pain in his voice was raw, a reminder of the personal tragedies that lay behind every survivor's eyes. Maria and João found themselves opening up about their own journey, the challenges they'd faced, and the hope that kept them going. The children, Sofia and Miguel, listened wide-eyed, too young to fully comprehend the world they'd lost, but old enough to understand the precariousness of their situation. As Sofia drifted off to sleep, her small hand clutching João's sleeve, he felt a surge of protectiveness he hadn't experienced since the world ended. It was a dangerous feeling in this unforgiving landscape. The next morning brought with it a difficult decision. Carlos and the children were in no condition to travel far. Staying with them meant slowing down, increasing their own risk. Leaving them behind felt unthinkable. Maria and João stepped away to discuss their options. "We can't abandon them," João argued. "But we can't stay here indefinitely," Maria countered. "Our supplies won't last." The debate raged, each point weighted with moral implications. In the end, they decided to stay for a few days, helping the family regain strength and teaching them survival skills. It was a compromise that satisfied neither of them fully but felt like the only ethical choice. Those days were a test of everything Maria and João had learned. They pushed themselves to find more food, to create better shelters, to stay vigilant against threats both human and environmental. They taught Carlos and the kids how to identify edible plants, how to move silently through urban areas, how to read the signs of danger. But more than survival skills, they found themselves imparting hope. For the first time in years, they were part of something larger than their own survival. It was exhausting, terrifying, and strangely exhilarating. As the time came for them to part ways, the goodbye was harder than any of them had expected. Carlos hugged them both, tears in his eyes. "You've given us a chance," he said. "We won't forget that." Sofia and Miguel clung to them, not fully understanding why their new friends had to leave. Maria knelt down, looking them in the eye. "Remember what we taught you," she said softly. "Stay strong, stay smart, and never lose hope." Watching the family disappear into the urban landscape, Maria and João felt a complex mix of emotions. Pride in what they'd accomplished, fear for the family's future, and a renewed sense of purpose in their own journey. They had passed a test they didn't know they were taking, a test of their humanity in a world that often seemed to have lost its own. As they resumed their own path, the weight of their packs seemed lighter somehow, balanced by the weight of the choice they had made. They had given up supplies, time, and a measure of safety. But they had gained something intangible and precious, a reminder of why survival mattered in the first place. The encounter left them with questions that would linger long after. In a world stripped to its bones, what obligations did they have to others? Was compassion a strength or a weakness? And in helping others, had they found a key to their own salvation? These questions had no easy answers, but as Maria and João walked on, hand in hand, they felt more human than they had in years. They had chosen kindness in a cruel world, and in doing so, reaffirmed their own humanity. The road ahead was no less dangerous, but they faced it with renewed purpose, carrying with them the hope they had rekindled in others, and in themselves. The horizon shimmered with an unfamiliar haze, drawing Maria and João forward with a mix of caution and curiosity. Days of relentless travel had taken their toll, but this new development energized their weary steps. As they crested a hill, the source of the haze became clear: smoke. Not the acrid, dark plumes of destruction they'd grown accustomed to, but thin wisps rising steadily into the air. Smoke meant fire. Fire meant people. People meant, what exactly, in this new world? Hope or danger? They approached carefully, senses heightened. The landscape had shifted subtly, small clearings in the urban decay, signs of deliberate cultivation amidst the wild overgrowth. Someone was tending this land, coaxing life from the ruins. As they drew closer, they caught glimpses of movement, human figures working in what appeared to be rudimentary gardens. The sight was so startlingly normal, so reminiscent of the world before, that Maria felt her breath catch in her throat. Joao's hand tightened on hers, a silent acknowledgement of the magnitude of what they were seeing. A voice called out, firm but not hostile. "That's far enough, strangers. State your business." The speaker emerged from behind a repurposed shipping container, a woman, perhaps in her 50s, weathered but standing tall, a makeshift spear in her hands. Maria and Joao raised their hands slowly, a universal gesture of peace. "We mean no harm," Joao called back. "We're travelers, looking for..." He trailed off, unsure how to articulate the nebulous goal that had driven them for so long. "Looking for a place to belong," Maria finished for him. The woman studied them intently, weighing their words, their appearance, the subtle cues that spoke of their long journey. After a tense moment, she lowered her weapon slightly. "You've found something, all right. Whether it's what you're looking for remains to be seen. I'm Elena. Welcome to Haven." As Elena led them into the settlement, Maria and Joao struggled to process what they were seeing. Haven was a patchwork community of perhaps 100 souls, carved out of the urban wasteland. Repurposed buildings housed families, while gardens flourished in every available space. Solar panels glinted on rooftops, and the sound of children's laughter, a sound they hadn't heard in years, drifted on the breeze. It was a pocket of life, of normalcy, in a world they'd thought beyond saving. Elena explained as they walked. Haven had started small, just a handful of survivors who refused to give up, who believed that humanity could rebuild. They'd faced countless challenges, hostile groups, resource scarcity, disease. But they'd persevered, growing slowly, integrating new members cautiously. "We've learned the hard way that trust must be earned," Elena said, her eyes sharp. "You'll be watched. You'll need to contribute. But if you're genuine, you'll find a home here." The implications of her words sank in slowly. A home. A community. The very things Maria and Joao had dreamed of finding but had almost given up hope for. As they were shown to a small room, a luxury after years of scavenging shelter where they could, the enormity of the situation overwhelmed them. They collapsed into each other's arms, tears flowing freely. It was joy, relief, and a crushing release of tension they'd carried for so long. But with hope came new anxieties. Could they truly fit in here, after so long on their own? What skills could they offer? And lurking beneath it all, a darker fear: what if this sanctuary was taken from them, as everything else had been? The coming days were a whirlwind of introductions, orientations, and evaluations. Maria's medical skills were immediately in high demand, while Joao's engineering background proved invaluable for Haven's ongoing infrastructure projects. They worked harder than they ever had, but for the first time in years, their labor felt purposeful, part of something larger than mere survival. They met others with stories similar to their own, survivors who'd traversed hell to find this oasis. Each tale was a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit, the stubborn refusal to succumb to despair. But Haven was not without its problems. Resources were always tight, and the threat of outside forces loomed large. Debates raged over expansion, over how to handle newcomers, over the very nature of what they were building. Maria and João found themselves drawn into these discussions, their experiences on the road providing valuable perspective. As weeks turned to months, Maria and João felt themselves changing, shedding the hardened shells they'd developed in the wastelands. They allowed themselves to form friendships, to laugh, to plan for a future beyond the next meal or safe place to sleep. João threw himself into teaching the community's children, while Maria worked to expand Haven's medical capabilities. Their room became a home, filled with small comforts they'd once thought lost forever. But with this reintegration into society came challenges. Nightmares plagued them both, vivid recreations of the horrors they'd witnessed, the impossible choices they'd made. They struggled at times with the structure of community life, with the need to consider others after so long focused solely on each other's survival. And always, there was the fear that it could all be taken away in an instant. One night, as they lay awake discussing their fears, a realization dawned. Haven wasn't just a place, it was an idea, a commitment to believing in humanity's potential for good, even in the darkest times. It was the very thing they'd been searching for, not just a physical sanctuary but a reason to keep going, to keep building, to keep hoping. As dawn broke over Haven, Maria and João stood on the roof of their building, watching the community come to life below. The challenges ahead were immense, rebuilding a world from the ashes of the old. But for the first time in years, those challenges felt surmountable. They had found more than just a safe haven, they had rediscovered hope. In that moment, with the sun rising on a new day, Maria turned to João, her eyes shining. "What do you think happens next?" she asked. João smiled, taking her hand. "I don't know," he said. "But whatever it is, we'll face it together. All of us." And in that simple exchange lay the heart of what they'd discovered, that the future, uncertain as it was something to look forward to, not fear. That humanity, with all its flaws and potential, was worth fighting for. That hope, once found, could light the way through even the darkest of times. A year had passed since Maria and João first stumbled upon Haven. The settlement had grown, both in size and in spirit. New faces had joined their ranks, each with their own story of survival and hope. The once barren landscape now boasted thriving gardens, a testament to human perseverance and nature's resilience. As dawn broke over the community, Maria stood at the window of the small clinic she'd helped establish. Her hand rested on her swollen belly, a new life growing within her, a beacon of hope in a world reborn. João entered quietly, his face etched with a mixture of joy and apprehension. "How are you feeling?" he asked, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Maria turned to him, her eyes reflecting the complex emotions they both felt. "Scared," she admitted. "Hopeful. Overwhelmed. I never thought we'd be here, bringing a child into this world." Their impending parenthood had sparked intense debates within Haven. Some saw it as a sign of progress, a return to normalcy. Others worried about the resources a new generation would require, the vulnerabilities it would create. For Maria and João, it was a leap of faith, a commitment to a future they were still unsure of. As they walked through Haven's bustling central square, they reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The hardships they'd endured, the moral dilemmas they'd faced, the moments of despair and triumph. Each experience had shaped them, preparing them for the roles they now played in rebuilding society. João had become a respected voice in Haven's council, his engineering skills and thoughtful approach to problem-solving valued by the community. Maria's medical expertise had saved lives and improved the health of the entire settlement. Together, they embodied the spirit of renewal that Haven represented. But with progress came new challenges. As word of Haven spread, more survivors sought refuge within its walls. Each new arrival brought skills and hope, but also strained resources and raised questions about the community's future. How large could they grow? How would they defend themselves against those who might seek to take what they had built? These questions weighed heavily on Maria and João as they prepared for their child's arrival. They found themselves engaging in long discussions about the world they wanted to create, the values they hoped to instill. What kind of life can we offer? João asked one evening, voicing the fear that lurked in both their hearts. Maria considered the question carefully. A life with purpose, she finally replied. A life where our child knows what it means to be part of something larger than themselves. Where they understand the value of community, of working together to build something meaningful. As Maria's due date approached, the entire community rallied around them. The event took on symbolic importance, the first child to be born in Haven, a bridge between the world that was and the world they were creating. Preparations were made, improvised medical equipment gathered, and a palpable sense of anticipation filled the air. When labor began, it was Elena, the woman who had first welcomed them to Haven, who stood by Maria's side along with João. Hours passed, filled with pain and determination. And then, in the early hours of the morning, a cry pierced the air, strong, defiant, full of life. As Maria held their daughter for the first time, tears streaming down her face, João beside her overcome with emotion, the significance of the moment washed over them. This child, born into a world so different from the one they had known, represented everything they had fought for. She was hope made flesh, a reason to keep building, keep striving for a better future. News of the birth spread through Haven like wildfire. Celebrations erupted spontaneously, a collective release of joy and optimism. For many, it was a turning point, concrete proof that life could flourish again, that the darkest days were behind them. In the quiet moments that followed, as Maria and João marveled at their newborn daughter, they found themselves reflecting on the long journey that had brought them to this point. The world outside Haven's walls was still dangerous, still broken in many ways. But within this community, they had found something precious, a chance to rebuild, to redefine what it meant to be human in a changed world. What should we name her? João asked softly, cradling the infant's tiny hand in his own. Maria smiled, a name coming to her that seemed to encompass everything they had experienced, everything they hoped for. Hope, she said simply. Let's call her Hope. As word of Hope's birth spread beyond Haven's borders, carried by traders and travelers, it became a symbol of resilience for other survivors. Stories were told of the community that had not just survived, but thrived, the place where children were being born again, where the future was being reimagined. Maria and João knew that the road ahead would not be easy. Raising a child in this new world would bring challenges they could scarcely imagine. But as they looked at their daughter, at the community that had come together to welcome her, they felt a profound sense of purpose. They had survived the end of one world. Now, with hope in their arms and a community at their backs, they were ready to help shape the beginning of another. The future, uncertain as it was, no longer seemed like something to fear. Instead, it was a canvas awaiting their contribution, a story they would help write, not just for themselves, but for Hope, and for all those who would come after. As the sun set on Haven, casting a golden glow over the settlement, Maria and João stood together, their daughter between them. They looked out at the world, a world of challenges and possibilities, of dangers and opportunities. And in that moment, they knew that whatever came next, they would face it as they had faced everything else, together, with hope in their hearts and the strength of their community behind them. The story of humanity's rebirth was just beginning, and they were ready to play their part.